Born in Kolkata in 1952, Vikram Seth is a critically acclaimed novelist, poet and travel writer. It was while pursuing his graduation at Corpus Christi College, Oxford, that he developed a keen interest in poetry. Seth is best known for The Golden Gate and A Suitable Boy. The latter is one of the longest novels ever written in English. Other famous works include Mappings, From Heaven Lake and Beastly Tales from Here and There. His works are heavily autobiographical in nature and have diverse themes and audiences. Seth has won several awards such as the Sahitya Akademi Award, the Commonwealth Writers' Prize and the Padma Shri. The tale of Melon City is from the collection Mappings. The poem is inspired by a story from the book Caravan of Dreams by Idris Shah, an author well known for his mystical stories. It is a humorous account of how a melon is crowned as the king of a city. The poem, which is a satire, subtly portrays the arrogance of those in power as well as the laxness of the people who allow this to continue as long as they are not directly troubled by those in power. Seth subtly draws attention to the fact that the ruler's apathy and the people's apathy reinforce each other, thus maintaining the status quo. Here is a summary of the poem The Tale of Melon City by Vikram Seth. Once there was a city which was ruled by a king who was impartial and calm. The king decreed that an arch be built across the main road of the city so that all those who observed it would be enlightened. The arch was built and the king rode down the road under the arch. Unfortunately, the arch was built so low that the king's crown was knocked off his head. The king was angry, unlike his placid self, and ordered that the chief builder be hanged. But as he was led to the gallows, the chief builder shouted out that it was the workmen who were to blame. The king considered this and declared that in all fairness the workers must be hanged. But the workers in turn shifted the blame onto the masons, claiming that the bricks were of the wrong size. The frightened masons blamed the architect. The architect, summoned before the king, neatly turned the tables and reminded the king of a small fact. When the architect had shown the plans to the king himself had made changes to them. The king was furious upon hearing this, but decided to seek advice. He asked for the wisest man in the kingdom to be summoned. The wisest man, so old that he could neither walk nor see, was carried to the court. On being asked for advice, the wisest man responded that it was the arch's fault. Since the arch had knocked off the king's crown, the arch must be hanged. But when the arch was taken to be hanged, a councillor declared it would be shocking to hang something that had touched the king's head. The king agreed. By then, the crowd watching this spectacle was beginning to get restless. The king sensed this and, anxious to pacify the crowd, decided that guilt could be established later. But someone had to be hanged immediately. So the noose was set up somewhat high and each person was measured. Strangely, only one man was found to be tall enough to fit the noose, the king himself. And thus, by his own decree, the king was hanged. The ministers heaved a sigh of relief. If someone had not been hanged, the people would have rebelled against the crown. But now the ministers had to find a new king. Messengers were sent out across the kingdom, declaring that the first person to pass the city gate would choose the next ruler. It so happened that a simpleton passed the gate next. When he was asked to name the king, the man who loved melons answered the question with his standard response, "A melon." And thus a melon was crowned the king of the city. All this took place years ago. When questioned about their choice of ruler, the people of the city merely regard it as tradition, not anything unusual. They claim that it doesn't matter if the king happens to be a melon, as long as he lets them live in peace and liberty. The poet concludes sarcastically that laissez-faire, where the government does not interfere in the lives of the people, seems to be a way of life in that city. The main characters in the poem are the king of Melon City and the people of Melon City, including the ministers and everyone who helped build the arch. Click each label to learn more about the characters. The king of Melon City is described as being just and placid, that is, fair and cool-headed. These are the ideal attributes of a ruler, but the king is anything but that. The king is actually quite egoistical. He chooses to assert his power over a trivial matter and decides to hang someone just because his crown was knocked off. But when he himself is in danger of being hanged, as he is ultimately responsible for the faulty arch, he decides to take advice first. Later, he chooses to completely ignore any need for justice or fairness by declaring that they must hang someone immediately and that guilt could be decided later. The king's actions and decisions are whimsical. He keeps changing his mind about whom to hang. His decision to hang the chief builder is not a rational one, because the builder is not responsible for knocking down the king's crown. Later, his whimsical nature leads to an arbitrary decision to hang anyone who fits the height of the noose. He finally becomes a victim of his own fickleness. The people of Melon City are indifferent as to who rules them as long as they can continue with their lives. They never bother to question why a melon rules them and blindly follow tradition. A herd mentality is prevalent among the people. They are more concerned with the hanging rather than understanding the true nature of events. The ministers of Melon City are short-sighted. They do not bother to think their actions through. They crown a melon to maintain the continuity of the monarchy, even though it was an idiot who chose a melon as the king. The workers show absolutely no sense of accountability. This is observed in the manner in which each person, right from the builder to the architect, passes the buck to the next person regarding the issue of the height of the arch. Now let us examine the poem closely. The poem is set in a fictional city in a monarchy. The fact that an exact setting is not specified in the poem highlights the universality of the poem. The poem humorously describes the manner in which the powerful exercise their authority. The arrogant king decides to hang someone over something trivial and without establishing guilt. This demonstrates the kind of power the king has and clearly shows how powerful people sometimes use their power for wrong purposes rather than for the benefit of the people they rule. Another theme in the story is the apathy of the common people towards things that directly affect them. This apathy is illustrated in the manner in which the citizens do not protest the obvious injustice taking place in front of their eyes. They do not care who is hanged, whether guilty or not, even if it is the king himself. A similar apathy can be seen in the arbitrary custom of selecting a new king by asking any passerby to name a king. The citizens do not care who is made king, even if it is a melon. The Tale of Melon City is a very rhythmical poem. It is organized in couplets, most of which are rhyming. The poem is an allegory. That is, it seems to be a simple tale, but actually contains a deeper moral and political message. On the surface, it is a silly story about a whimsical king who falls victim to his own irrational actions. However, on a deeper level, it is a commentary on the responsibilities of a ruler or a government and those of the citizens. The poem also operates as a satire on monarchy and the attitude of common people. It highlights the foolishness of the king and the subjects who obey him unquestioningly. The poem creates humor through the use of sarcasm. Situational irony, where something occurs which is opposite to what is expected, is used to great humorous effect in the poem. One instance of this is when the king intends to arbitrarily hang any person who fits the noose, and he himself is found to fit the noose. The king is thus hanged in accordance with his own orders. Another ironic circumstance is that the melon which becomes king is seen by the people to be as good as the previous king. The poem also has several instances of sarcasm where the poet mocks the characters. More than once, the king is described as being just and placid, when it is clear from the king's words and actions that he has neither of these qualities. Another instance is at the end of the poem, when the poet mockingly remarks that the city seemed to follow the principles of laissez-faire.